Bienvenue à cette semaine italienne virtuelle. Nous allons maintenant écouter la présentation du livre de Agata de Santis et du documentaire du même nom.
Hey there. Welcome to everything you ever wanted to know about Malocchio with me, Agata de Santis. I am a writer and filmmaker here in Montreal, and in 2010, I directed and produced a documentary film called Malocchio. And we actually had the Montreal premiere right here at Montreal's Italian Week. So it's great to be back a decade later to talk about the same subject that I've enjoyed talking about for a decade. We had a lot of fun with this film. We actually aired it on CBC television, but we also brought it around. We created various community screenings in Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto. We went to parts of New Jersey, New York, Boston. We even went as far as Australia to screen the film. And what was always amazing about these screenings is we always followed up the screening with a conversation with the audience. And it was a great opportunity to hear people's own stories about Malocchio, their experiences, what they believed, what they didn't believe. They had a lot of questions. And a common question I had was, what's going to be your follow-up? Are you going to make a part 2, a sequel to the film? And I was never quite sure. So I decided we're exactly a decade after the release. And so on August 31st, I'm going to be releasing an illustrated coffee table book called Malocchio. And again, the book will look at different aspects of the belief. And what's fun is it'll give me a chance to include a lot of anecdotes and details and tidbits that just didn't fit in the film. You know, when you make a documentary, you've got a story to tell, but here with a coffee table book, all those little details that didn't have a place in the film now have a place in the book. So that book is coming out August 31st, and you can actually pre-order it right now at redheadproductions.com. So today we're going to look at what exactly Malocchio is, how to prevent it, and should you get it, how to cure it. But we're also going to have some fun and look back at the documentary film that I did make 10 years ago. The first scene we're going to look at is a scene from Eboli, Italy. So in the film, it's sort of my journey to uncover what Malocchio is and if I myself believe in it. So I got to film in Montreal and different parts of North America, and we had the opportunity to go to Italy to do some filming. So there's a town called Eboli, not far from Naples. And some of you may recognize the name. There's a famous book called Cristo si è fermato a Eboli, Christ stopped at Eboli. It's actually a famous saying that a lot of people in the South use. And once upon a time, there was a belief that some of the best practitioners, the curers of Malocchio, were to be found in this town. So I thought, if I'm going to go back to the source, let me go to this town. So we were there for about a week. It was amazing. I arrived there with my cameraman, Elias, and we had 5 days to not only find people to interview, but actually to interview them. So we got lucky and we met a local there. And through him, he just opened up the town to us, and we got to film a really cool sequence in Eboli, Italy. And here it is. Cristo si è fermato a Eboli. Christ stopped at Eboli. A saying made famous in the 1940s by Italian writer Carlo Levi, when his novel of the same name introduced the reader to the living conditions of the Italians in this small town just southeast of Napoli. It's a saying that my mom remembers hearing as a child. It seems misfortune always hit Eboli, and the locals began to believe that Christ himself would never step foot in their town. When my mom was a child, the best cures of Malocchio were said to be found right here.
Oh, Malocchio, c'è un esempio vivente.
Allora vedi, quando gioco a carte io, vinco solo quando c'è dietro quel signore là, quello che è andato via. Ho detto prima. Quando c'è lui, vinco sempre.
Ecco, lui è un credente in queste cose.
Allora lui poi quando lui gioca a carte, io vado dietro di lui perde sempre. Vedi un poco.
Lui crede nella fortuna,
chiamano
nella
malocchio,
sfortuna.
chiamano. È una cosa che comunque capita quasi sempre.
The locals in Eboli are extremely welcoming, but I can't seem to find a cure of malocchio willing to talk on camera. Luckily, I'm introduced to a local anthropologist who's actually doing research on the practice of malocchio. Professor Raffaele Ferrara. Questa credenza nel malocchio esiste ancora oggi in Italia?
Da noi sì, da noi sì. Io il discorso che faccio a livello scientifico è che al nord non hanno tempo contro il malocchio. Pigliano l'aspirina, una pillola particolare e passa. Invece qui da noi c'è ancora il tempo per pensare a questo malocchio. L'Italia del Sud credeva e crede ancora, perché questo qua è un mondo a parte, dice Lucano, dove la sofferenza è silenziosa, non c'è grande movimento, grandi moini, grandi chiasso. Il mondo contadino meridionale si è evoluto, c'è arrivata la televisione, internet, però ancora ci sono queste radici culturali profondissime nel rispetto della famiglia.
Since the belief in malocchio is still prevalent in southern Italy, wearing amulets is common practice. In Eboli, believers head to Paolo Bisogno's jewelry shop to stock up.
Qua abbiamo una rappresentazione di un classico portafortuna napoletano, che è il gobbetto, detto anche scuscinatiello. Vedi, c'ha la gobba, sotto porta il collo, poi come potete vedere porta delle piccole ciampe di cavallo. E questo è proprio quello che dovrebbe essere il più potente degli amuleti per il malocchio. Tutti questi amuleti, che fanno parte della tradizione, diciamo, italiana, napoletana, non sono ammessi chiaramente dalla religione, quindi ci sta una netta differenza tra la credenza pagana, quindi che si va a regalare il simbolo contro il malocchio, e quella che è la religione che non lo ammette. Questo sentimento si è talmente diffuso con la religione che non si riesce più a separare il sacro dal profano. Allora succede che mi vengono delle persone che vogliono regalare l'amuleto, tipo il cornetto, da portare al battesimo, da far mettere in chiesa al bambino, insieme alla classica croce che fa il padrino, la croce che poi viene benedetta. Allora io dire no, il prete non vuole, non potete portare il cornetto in chiesa.
La Chiesa non ha visto mai bene il malocchio, perché praticamente va al di fuori della fede religiosa e quindi ovviamente un po' agli antitesi. Ma nel malocchio c'è un fatto più umano, concreto, di persone, e che le persone vogliono questo rapporto. Mentre con Dio il rapporto è un poco particolare, tu vai in chiesa, stai solo con te stesso, riesci ad immaginare che il Cristo o il Santo ti aiuti, però nel malocchio tu vai dalla persona che ti risolve il problema. Quindi ti fa passare il malocchio. Vuoi la mescolanza di queste credenze, vuoi il momento particolare di autosuggestione che c'è, ti passa il malocchio. Ecco perché c'è sta questa dicotomia che la Chiesa ovviamente non può vedere e non può sopportare questa cosa. Questa semplice e lineare premessa ci ha entusiasmati, dice questo scrittore.
Professor Ferrara invites me to one of his monthly lectures on local folklore and literature.
E proprio per questo ci siamo detti, se esiste il malocchio,
tonight, he talks about malocchio.
anche dei metodi e dei rimedi per allontanarlo o per scongiurarlo.
At the lecture, I meet Professor Eduardo Apellano, who, it turns out, is an avid believer in malocchio.
Osso, pinosso e misericordioso, chi va male a chi sti boss, a da fa pure prima se si crinda all'osso. Ciu, vattene fuori da casa mia, tu non sei la compagna mia, non ti voglio più vedere. Ciu, questa è la formula.
È bellissimo.
Ti piace?
Sì.
Qua ce ne sono tante altre.
Ci stanno, sì.
Si fa così, ruta, prezzemolo e finocchio, no? Mettile pure dentro un secchio, mettici dentro un corno vecchio, un bicchio, un bacchio e un bapocchio, portati via il piripicchio, portati tutto via secondo me. Così si fa per liberare le case dai
malocchi.
Com'era? Luria.
Luria.
Maronna, è una cosa luria.
Io ho parlato già.
Ciao Canada.
Però il problema è che
Professor Ferrara offers to introduce me to a curer of malocchio, but he has some conditions. I cannot suggest that malocchio does not exist, as she will be extremely offended. I can't ask to watch her cure someone, as she'll outright refuse. I agree to his terms. Elena Mastrangelo lives with her blind companion in a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of Eboli. Chi ti ha insegnato il malocchio?
Mia mamma. Tenia 13 anni. Diceva, mamma, imparato tutto, figlia mia. Quando tu trovi imparata, che tu trovi da una parte, tieni un male di capo, che tu tieni le figlie, che fa? E così sta. Ce n'è dato botto, mamma.
In quei tempi, sì.
A scuola non ci aiuto. Aiuto solo al lavoro. Imparai a fare un male di testa, un male di pancia, tutte cose imparavo.
Sono donne, ma sono in particolare delle persone addette nel mondo contadino. In genere non sono mai professioniste e si va da queste persone. A queste persone non si paga, si dà un contributo, ci si saluta perché molte volte ci si accontenta il saluto, oppure ci si diventa parente battezzando un figlio oppure assistente al matrimonio del figlio, queste cose qui, questa parentela. Però in genere portano a queste donne che poi sono quasi tutti bisognosi, non hanno pensioni, non hanno niente, vivono di espedienti, gli portano il cibo, il pane fresco, le patate, quelle che riescono, un poco di olio, queste cose qua per sopravvivere. E loro sono contentissime.
Adesso chi ti chiama per fare la cura?
Tutti quanta gente mi chiamano.
E chi vengono? Sono piuttosto i vecchietti,
i
giovani?
I bambini. Ieri sera facete uno bambino piccolino che io purtroppo, poi venne la pecciorella, poi facete quella, vengono i vecchietti, mi chiamano un pronto e fai gente mi viene spastariato così. Io lo spastario quando venne sempre tutto là. Venne una volta, venne due, venne tre, venne quattro. Già sono già l'anno che mi cangiano l'occhio che la manè. E tu, chi tu levano allora tuo figlio tu malegato. Figlio è brutto malegato. E chi quando ti pigli che lo male capo, manca. E quando ti pigli mano l'orecchio, ma l'orecchio ci vede la candela, il giroggio, metti in e tiri tutto quella roba lì. Per mia madre non imparava tutto. Poi ogni tanto faceva mamma, faceva sempre.
Esisterà ancora la credenza nel malocchio perché nonostante l'evoluzione, il fatto mentale della persona non è un fatto che si acquisisce in un giorno, ci vogliono secoli per poter... Quando si dice, per esempio, normalmente si dice è quello alla cultura. La cultura non è cosa che si dà da un giorno all'altro, ci vogliono generazioni per poter migliorare questa cosa.
Welcome back to everything you ever wanted to know about malocchio with me, Agata de Santis. Hope you enjoyed our trip to Eboli. It was an amazing time. We spent 5 amazing days in this beautiful, welcoming town and got to learn a little bit more about malocchio. So now we're going to talk about what exactly is malocchio. And there's always an antidote I like to share, I think is the best way to explain how this works. So let's say you're walking down the street, going for a walk with your baby in the stroller, and you happen to come across an acquaintance, an old friend, a relative, someone you know, and you start up a little chit-chat, and of course, they are going to compliment your adorable little baby in the stroller. Oh my gosh, she's so cute, You might brag about some accomplishment. Maybe she just said her first word. Maybe she started crawling. It's that type of typical conversation that happens. Now, deep down, the person that you met, the person that's complimenting your baby, will have some kind of envy or jealousy. Maybe because your kid's so cute, they think you're really lucky. Because of this baby, your life situation, maybe they themselves want kids. There's a whole gamut of reasons why they can potentially have a jealousy or envy towards this child. Now, what's going to happen is unintentionally, and this is very important, unintentionally, because of this envy or jealousy, they're going to give malocchio, they're going to give the evil eye to the little baby in the stroller. And what will happen is once you guys say your goodbyes and go off your way, 20, 30 minutes later, maybe your baby's gonna start becoming very fussy all of a sudden, cranky, irritable, something odd's gonna happen. And usually what ends up happening is either you or usually your mom, your aunt will be like, oh, who did you just bump into? I think someone gave the baby malocchio. And it's that simple. It's really that. Someone will, due to any kind of jealousy or envy, give malocchio unintentionally to, in this case, the baby, but it could be to you. Some people say it could even be to your crops, your garden, animals, livestock, all that kind of fun stuff. So that is what it is. It's an unintentional giving of malocchio due to envy or jealousy. And then the person who gets it, so as an adult, you'll get maybe a weird headache. You'll feel this odd exhaustion that sort of comes over you, that kind of thing. Now, there are ways to prevent it, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. There are different amulets or sayings that can prevent, for example, that baby getting malocchio from the admirer. And then should you get it, there are cures to obviously get rid of malocchio. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. The evil eye is actually not exclusive to Italians. This belief is actually one of the oldest and most widespread superstitions around the world. Different cultures have a belief in the evil eye. There are variations, of course, to each one. Even Italians ourselves have variations to our belief in malocchio. And I mean, it goes as far back as ancient Egypt. So it's a pretty old superstition, but it's a weird one because we don't really talk about it openly. It's kind of something, I'm sure a lot of you watching will be like, oh yeah, my grandmother or my mom, my aunt used to talk about it, but not openly. Actually, my brothers used to tease me all the time that I sort of brought, with this film, I brought it up and sort of forced people to talk about it openly. So, so that's a very important thing. Now, the interesting thing is, despite how widespread and old this superstition is, and the variations and how it works exactly, and the amulets to protect you and the cures, there are actually 7 common factors to all beliefs in the evil eye. So no matter from what ethnic culture you come from, what century we're talking about, academics have put together a list of 7 common factors in the belief of the evil eye. And here they are. Number 1, the power emanates from the eye and strikes either a person or an object. So obviously we call it the evil eye, so it's coming from the person's gaze. And like I mentioned, it will either affect, let's say, the baby in your stroller or you yourself. And, you know, some people will go as far as saying someone, you know, gave my giardino the malocchio, or, you know, back in the day when a lot of our families had farms in Italy, something could happen to their, you know, their cattle or their sheep. So that's number 1. Number 2. The stricken person or object is of value and its destruction or injury is sudden. So obviously, the baby is very precious to you. You yourself are precious to you. If you're a farmer, your crops are precious to you. Your animals are precious to you. When we talk about destruction, it's mostly obviously the crops and animals. Injury usually happens to the person. So obviously, you're gonna feel crappy that, you know, this injury has happened and it's sudden. So usually the timing of all the different stories I've heard from people, the timing is within 20, 30 minutes of this encounter, the injury will occur. Number 3 of common factors for all believers in the evil eye. The person casting the evil eye does not realize he or she has that power. And that is very important. I find a lot of people, when I've talked to them about malocchio, they mix up witchcraft with malocchio. So when they talk about, for example, oh, I'm going to curse someone with the evil eye, that's actually wrong. the curse is possible if you believe in it, but that sort of falls into black magic. The evil eye is about this unintentional giving of injury because of envy or jealousy. So very important. Two separate worlds. We've got black magic, where you're going to some kind of witch, or in Italy we call them magos, to cast a curse, or it's just regular people who don't realize they're giving malocchio. So those are two different things. All right, number 4. The person affected is not always able to identify the source of the evil eye. And this is where I find is the most hilarious thing. So if you're at a party and you're looking great, maybe you got a new haircut, you've got a great outfit, maybe some really amazing shoes that everyone's complimenting you. Here's the problem, that if you've chatted with a dozen or so people and at some point during the party you feel ill, your mom, your aunt, your grandmother, someone, usually an older woman in the family, right away is going to be like, someone gave you malocchio. The problem is, who gave it to you? And one of the first questions I will always be asked, I know when I talk to my mother about malocchio, the first thing they always ask is, who did you talk to? Who did you see? Who did you bump into? So sometimes at a party, it's difficult to say. You'll be like, well, I've got like a long list of people I just chatted with. In a situation like the stroller, it'll be like, oh shoot, I bumped into that one person, maybe that's the person. But still, a lot of times it's difficult to identify the culprit. Number 5, common factors in all beliefs. The evil eye can be deflected or its effects cured by particular devices, rituals, and symbols. So it's all about the amulets. And I'm sure all of us have grown up knowing very well the little corno. We're going to talk about them more in detail. But these are amulets that people wear. Usually, very important, it has to touch the skin, which is why the amulet on a chain is a very popular amulet, or around the wrist and a bracelet. There are ways to protect yourself. So a lot of times it's actual charms or amulets. Sometimes there's little sayings you can do. There's all kinds of different things. But protection, in every belief in the evil eye, there are protections. So that's a very common factor. So the number 6 most common factor is that the belief in the evil eye helps to explain or rationalize sickness, misfortune, or loss of possessions. And this is where it gets a little academic, but we have to think back to the origins of malocchio and why did this belief even start? And so what experts, historians, academics have concluded was that in times of unexplainable situations, so why does a baby become fussy all the time? Why are you feeling 100% and then all of a sudden you've got this weird stomach ache or a headache or this overall fatigue? Somehow they started linking sort of this mystical, magical transfer of illness because of someone's envy or jealousy. And of course, it just became easy at one point to just explain misfortune. So something crappy happens, your tomato plants all of a sudden die on you, you get this weird illness, this fatigue that just occurs, your baby gets fussy. How do I explain this misfortune? I blame someone else. And it's sort of become a way to rationalize something that cannot be easily explained. It's not like, oh, I was exhausted and I have a headache. No, I was fine. This headache just appeared out of nowhere. So it's a really interesting way to explain things that cannot be explained. Now, of course, the non-believers will say, well, that's easy. You blame everything on malocchio then. There have to be certain factors for someone to legitimately say, hey, I think this is a malocchio. All right. So the last most common factor for all beliefs in the evil eye, and we've talked about this a lot already, envy or jealousy is an underlying factor of the evil eye. And really that is the core of it. Now, what happens is there are certain believers, mostly in the southern parts of Italy, that will have taught their kids generations ago, and maybe even as recently as now, is that it is very important not to show off, let's say a new possession or a new fortune. So you got a new job, don't go around bragging about this new job, a new car, something really exciting happened in your life. It's part of the culture to not overly brag about really good things that happen to you because you don't want the evil eye. So that's quite an interesting thing. If you think about, go back to especially your grandparents' generation and how they always wanted to sort of keep the good news a little hushed. There's a reason for that. So those are the 7 common factors for all beliefs in malocchio. So now next up is how to prevent it. And we have a whole gamut of really fun amulets to show you. All right, it's now time to talk about the amulets. And for any believer in the malocchio and the evil eye superstition, protecting yourself from malocchio is such a big part of the belief. So the idea is that you need to have an amulet near you, close to your skin, so that in case you get that compliment we've talked about, should you have an amulet next to your skin, technically you should not get the malocchio because you're protecting yourself. So let's look, we're going to look at the amulets first, and then we're going to talk about a few things you can do in an emergency should you not have an amulet near you and you need to protect yourself. All right, so let's look at what some of the other cultures have. So one of my favorite amulets is actually, and you've seen this everywhere, it's actually the Turkish eye. And this is actually an amulet against the evil eye. And they're just so beautiful. So obviously the common factor is always this blue eye with the white and black. And it comes in so many beautiful designs. Look at this one. And they get elaborate. I mean, some are just insane. They're big, they're elaborate. These are fun. This is a little keychain with 7 Turkish eyes. So that's a popular one. If you have Greek friends, if you know anyone of Greek origin, for them, the evil eye is the mati. And what they wear is usually around either around their neck on a chain or on a bracelet. It's just a little blue cube. And that's their protection. And there's different designs. I've got 2 here. And that is their protection against the evil eye. Similar to the Turkish blue eye, it's just that it's a cube. Now, for Italians, we don't have 1 amulet, we don't have 2, we actually have 3. So the most popular one is the corno, the horn. And of course, the most famous one is the red plastic, and there's usually a type of crown on the top. So this is, the most popular one. There's the smaller version of the corno. And then, of course, you've seen all kinds of fun little ones. We all have people in our family. We all know someone who wears a silver or gold corno around their neck. And there's so many variations. This keychain, for example, has 3 cornos and a horseshoe. This is a fun little one. You can find a lot of these in like Naples, where it's just a bunch of little ones on a chain. And look at this. So this is my favorite. So over the years, artisans and artists have got very, very creative with the corno. This is actually an artisanally made corno made with ceramic in Naples. Look how gorgeous this baby is. And obviously this, you don't wear this. It's something to ornate in your house, but it's gorgeous. And then I've also found over the years sort of a variation on the horn. So you've got this cool, I have them in 3 colors. So kind of a dark red, a white, and a black corno. This is, they call it lava stone. Look at this beauty. This guy became like the, I guess the mascot of my documentary film. And this, I found it in a button store of all places in New York City. This one's gorgeous too. So there's, over the years, a lot of fun variations on the corno. For a while, some of the top designers were actually creating beautiful variations of the corno that sort of became a fashion statement. Now, what's happened, of course, is if you go into like a Little Italy, in any of your favorite cities, and you go to the souvenir shop, chances are you'll see these cornos. Some people know what it's for. Others just think it's like a good luck charm or a fun little souvenir, but it's really all about protecting you from the evil eye. Now, why the horn? We're not really sure. Some people believe that, some experts believe that if you think of the horn with its tip, this is something that can easily pierce the gaze. And if you think of it, it can actually physically pierce out an eye. And so that's kind of the idea, is that what you're supposed to do, so let's say you're wearing it around your neck, or some people have it on a keychain, should you get some kind of compliment and there's, you know, that thought at the back of your mind, oh shoot, did that person just give me malocchio? You should technically and discreetly, very important, kind of take the horn around your neck or in your pocket and just point the piercing part towards the person. So I've got my cameraman there, and if he complimented my new haircut and I was like, shoot, did he just give me malocchio? I should discreetly maybe just kind of do this towards him. That's the idea behind the protection. So the corno is probably the most popular amulet. I said we've got 3. The second one, this guy. So this, the official name is the mano cornuta. And it's literally, you take your 2 middle fingers and your thumb. You do so. We all know this if you're a fan of heavy metal. This became a very popular gesture that was first made by Ronnie James Dio, who became the frontman of Black Sabbath after Ozzy left. And I talk about it in my book, actually. He kind of started the gesture, it became famous, and he has been quoted as saying, I didn't invent this gesture, it was actually my Italian grandmother who used to do this gesture to protect one from the evil eye, and it's sort of been adopted by the metal kids. So that's the mano cornuta. Now, if you think of it, same thing. You've got your 2 fingers out. You can pierce the eyes. It's always that idea. And same thing again, should you have this amulet anywhere on your body and you think someone gave you malocchio, again, discreetly, you're supposed to kind of take it and point the fingers towards that person. Now, the cool thing with this amulet is, if you don't have one, just do the hand gesture. But again, discreetly, you cannot, it's so important, you cannot go to the person and be like, hey, you gave me malocchio. That is such a faux pas. You should do it discreetly. So usually people do it like behind their back, or they have their hand in their pocket and always gesture towards the direction of the person you think may have just given you malocchio. And this should happen very quickly after the compliment or the admiration. Don't wait an hour or 2 or you're gonna be sick. Okay, another one we have, this is the 3rd one, this guy. This guy's funny. Officially called the gobetto or the gobo. He's a complicated one. It's a hunchback, so you see the hunch. He's usually very well dressed, so he's always got the top coat and the top hat. He's got one hand doing the mano cornuto, the other hand with a horseshoe. Sometimes the other hand might have an umbrella, so it's one or the other. And usually the bottom portion of his body is the corno. So some people, not all, there's a big disagreement as to which is the most powerful amulet. A lot of people will argue it's the corno because it's the most popular one. Others will say, well, no, look at the gobetto. I mean, he's got everything. He's got the horn. He's got the mano cornuto. He's got the horseshoe, which Italians believe gives him a lot of good luck. The humpback, there are some people in the south of Italy. We have to remember humpbacks were a very rare person. There were jokes about, which is kind of sad, but if you rubbed the humpback of the person with it, it brought you good luck. It's kind of a faux pas, but that was a belief back then. So This guy, the gobbetto, is a great one. And again, this one's on a keychain. Sometimes you'll see it on as a little charm that you can put around your neck, but he's a fun one. So these are the 3 amulets. We've got the corno, the mano cornuta, and the gobbetto. So these are amulets you can have. Now I did mention before, should you be in an emergency and you don't have any of these amulets around, you can do the hand gesture of the mano cornuto. You can also say a blessing. So for example, if someone compliments your baby, oh my God, your daughter's so cute, yeah. You should respond by saying something like, God bless, Dio la benedica in Italian. And that idea is that by by thanking the higher power for, let's say, your baby, you are not taking credit for the cute kid. You're actually giving God credit. And that is supposed to help to reverse any potential malocchio. So that kind of cuts off the magical power coming to the baby or to yourself. So let's say, you got a really great promotion at work and you're telling people and everybody's like, oh, that's so amazing, good for you, blah, blah, blah. Just by responding, thanks be to God, God bless, any term like that, you are attributing the success to a higher power, not to yourself. Therefore, that jealousy should be cut off. Then there's some fun things. There is another famous thing when someone is complimented. In Italian, we say tocca ferro, so touch iron. The idea is that if you have anything around you that is made of iron and you touch it, that should help you protect it. Now, of course, we have to think back to our grandparents and great-grandparents who were on farms, on agricultural lands, so they had access to a lot of iron, so that became a popular thing. There is one, a little crude, works mostly for boys, but the saying goes for some that should you not have anything else readily available, you can grab your private parts. I'm just throwing that out there. I do not suggest we do it. There are so many other things you can do, but that was also a way of protecting yourself from malocchio. I'm just the messenger, folks. So these are some of the fun amulets we have. Now, should the protection not work, or maybe you didn't even have the protection near you, now it's about the cure. Now, what I want to do, we're going to take a little break before I talk a little more detail, because there's actually 2 types of cures with a gazillion variations, but 2 types. And I want to show you guys another clip from my documentary film on malocchio. So obviously in the film, I also looked at the curing ritual. And there's a great scene I have, it's just a few minutes long, with my... So my uncle's wife, so my aunt by marriage, and her sister. So Franca and Lina were gracious enough not only to be interviewed, but they are both avid believers in malocchio, and Lina especially is called upon often to cure malocchio. And she was gracious enough to show us on camera what her ritual is. So she uses the olive oil and water ritual. So let's check it out and we'll be right back. Now it's time to learn the olive oil and water ritual. Like Mom's prayer, the ritual functions to first test the existence of malocchio and then to cure it. It's Lina's turn to teach me.
Allora, riempio il piatto dell'acqua, prendo un po' di sale e l'olio.
Che fai? Spiega che...
Adesso metto il piatto sulla testa.
E la persona deve mantenere?
Deve mantenere.
Ok.
Prendo un pizzico di sale, faccio la croce.
Ok.
e metto le 3 gocce.
Aspetta, 3 gocce.
Sì.
E dopo si toglie il piatto?
Si toglie il piatto e vede le gocce, se rimangono intere non ce l'ha. Se le gocce si aprono, che si stendono, c'è il malocchio.
Ok, so dopo diciamo ma... Ma finché ce l'hai pure oggi?
Io penso che ce l'ho.
Perché
Non mi sentivo male veramente io, non era...
Sono fatte già più grandi.
Ma tu quando facevi questo per la testa dici qualcosa o basta che fai il...
La croce dice la croce, Padre, Figliolo e Spirito Santo.
So mentre che fai quel...
La croce, quando prendi il sale, fai così, tu dici...
Se mo diciamo che l'hai fatto e vedi che la persona tiene un malocchio, cosa si fa adesso?
Fai questo e lo devi fare 3 volte.
La stessa cosa?
La stessa cosa.
E succede qualche volta che tu provi e non si toglie un malocchio?
No, si toglie se ce l'ha. Se non ce l'ha, sono altri problemi.
So per te, se la persona lo tiene, facendo questa cura e marcia.
Lavoro.
Ma lavoro, guarda, come lavoro, io mi incomincio a sentire meglio.
And we are back. So that was a clip from my documentary film called Malocchio that came out 10 years ago. And we actually premiered it in Montreal at Montreal's Italian Week. And you can actually now watch the film for free in its entirety on YouTube. So you can just go to YouTube and search Malocchio, or you can go to my website at redheadproductions.com, and we've got the direct link to the video. So the cure we just saw Lina perform on Franca is one of 2 possible curing rituals for Malocchio. Now what I should say is that there are actually the line I always say is there are as many variations on the curing ritual as there are towns in Italy. And the reason is that the teaching of the cure is passed on orally, and we're talking generation after generation of oral tradition. And so of course what happens is that each person's taking in of the information is not 100% accurate. If you think of the game we all played as kids, the telephone line, where let's say you've got 5 people in a row, the first person tells the second person a line, then the second person has to whisper it to the next, and by the time you get to the last person, that sentence is very different to the original, and it's the same idea here. So the variations will change in like the type of prayers that are used, the ordering, the incantation is a little different because everybody remembers it differently. And I think also with time, they kind of just change the way they do it. But that actually doesn't seem to change the power of the cure. So the one we saw with Lina is the traditional, you've got the bowl of water with the drops of olive oil, and the concept there is that oil and water do not mix. So the concept is if Lina starts the curing ritual and while she's doing the incantation and the ritual, the olive oil droplets disperse and disappear into the water, that tells her, Franca has Malocchio. Should the goblets remain intact, she doesn't have it. And the interesting thing with these cures is they actually act as diagnosis and cure. So while she's doing the ritual, she'll be able to tell you if you have Malocchio, and simply by doing the ritual, she's actually starting to cure you of Malocchio. If you happen to get a really strong case of Malocchio, she might do the incantation, the ritual, a second and even a third time. The second type of curing ritual, it's a little simpler. There's no bowl of water. There's no olive oil. It's literally just prayers and kind of like funny rhymes, rituals, however you want to call it. And that's actually the type of curing ritual my mom does. So I'm going to sort of explain how she does it. So for my mom, if you tell her, Ma, I think I have Malocchio, in order to start the ritual, she either needs to touch you, or if, let's say, you were visiting and yesterday, earlier in the day, whatnot, so she can't touch you because you're not present with her, she'll sort of be like, oh, what did you touch while you were here? Oh, you sat on that chair? If I touch the chair, I sort of get remnants of your energy. So definitely she either has to touch the person who has, the person themselves, or something they recently touched. And then what she'll do is she'll actually, I've never seen her do it in front of me. She likes to sort of go off on her own, so go into a room by herself. And she's got this long ritual, and it's a mix of Hail Marys and sort of funny, they're actually quite strange limericks that she has to repeat. And she kind of does it in a whisper. And then what's supposed to happen is that if the person she's curing actually has malocchio, she will know, because as she's doing the incantation, she's actually going to start yawning and actually tearing up. And the stronger the yawning, the more tears in her eyes, the stronger the malocchio. And again, in this case, the ritual acts as both a diagnosis and a cure. So she'll be able to tell that you have malocchio because she's yawning non-stop and she's tearing up. And then because she's doing the incantation, she's curing you of malocchio. And in my mom's case, usually in about 20 minutes, she'll give you a call and she'll be like, how are you doing? And usually she'll be like, oh, wow, it was really bad because I was like yawning like crazy. I couldn't stop. I was tearing. Or she'll be like, I had to do it a second time because that's how bad it was. And the thing my mom will always ask, if you call her and ask for a cure, who did you talk to? Who did you see? That's always a question for them. And then, of course, she'll usually lecture you for not wearing an amulet. Because she'll be like, if you wore an amulet, this wouldn't have happened. So these are the two types of curing rituals. So either just sort of a series of prayers and rhymes that the person curing you has to say, or this whole olive oil drops in a bowl of water ritual. And even there's variations. So in the video, we see Lena putting the bowl of water on someone's head. Not everybody does that. Some people use a pinch of salt. They throw that into the mix, some don't. So again, even with that physical ritual, there are variations. How do you learn to cure malocchio? So I always tell people when I've screened the film and we talk about this, is that if you're of Italian origin, chances are you know someone, your mom, your grandmother, an aunt, a friend of the family who knows how to cure malocchio. Traditionally, it's women who know how to cure it. There are some men that have sort of come into the mix, but you know, the majority of curers are women, and then they will teach other women how to cure it. And what happens is that each person who possesses that power kind of has to decide, who am I going to pass this knowledge on to? And usually it's a daughter, a niece, a godchild, someone they're very close to. And again, even in the teaching of the cure, there are different variations. So I've heard stories of some people can only teach the ritual at midnight on Christmas Eve. That's a popular one, but not everybody does that. Some people believe if I know how to cure malocchio, I can only teach 3 people, and when I teach the 3rd person, I myself will lose the power to cure. A lot of people insist that it's a very secret passing of information. So for example, they're hesitant to tell everyone or anyone the ritual. Not everybody believes that. Some people are very open about the ritual. They've never felt there was an issue about sort of telling numerous people. Others are like, no, I'm only allowed to tell so many people. There are other beliefs, for example, that if you're being taught malocchio, while you're being taught the cure, you're allowed to take notes. However, it's meant as a memory ritual. You know, the idea is that when you write something down, it's easier to help memorize. However, you are then supposed to burn that piece of paper. So there cannot be any any evidence of this passing of the ritual, which is why the incantations have changed over the years. Now, I'm lucky in that my mom is very open about sharing the incantation. So her ritual is actually in my coffee table book. She has been very generous to share her incantation. And I remember the first time I had her write it down, which was when I was making the film a decade ago. It was probably the first time she wrote the lines down. So obviously the prayers, you know, we're very familiar with the Hail Marys and whatnot, but sort of the incantation portion of it was kind of like odd rhymes. And I'm like, Mom, this story makes no sense. And she kind of looked at it and said, oh yeah, it's just, I guess I never realized it because I just used to always, you know, dictate it orally. I've never written it down. So it is a little funny. It rhymes. There's a little story in the ritual, but it works. My mother has used it many times. So those are the cures. So I've had people over the years say, how do I learn how to cure it? The best way is to find someone in your family, someone, a close friend of the family who's of Italian origin, knows someone or is the person that's going to teach you. And then you have to ask. And depending on what they believe, you know, how many people they're allowed to teach, when they're allowed to teach, you might be lucky enough to get the cure. So those are the cures. Is it real? Is it not real? When I was doing my research, when I was filming, a saying that a lot of people recounted, and all over the place, they would tell me, non è vero, ma ci credo. It's not real, but I believe. And it's this sort of, especially let's say if I was talking to an academic, they're like, well, the academic side of me is like, I'm not sure. It's kind of a weird superstition, belief. But then there's always a part of them that says, well, just in case it is real, I don't want to like poo-poo it. So hence, it's not real, but just in case. And I'm going to tell a funny story. One of the first interviews I did for the film, the interview actually didn't make it into the film, but this woman, Maria, was nice enough to let me interview her about malocchio. So we went to her home. We sat in her kitchen because, of course, most curing of malocchios, by the way, happen in a kitchen setting. So we sat down and, you know, I interviewed her about her belief and how she was taught. So in her case, her mom taught her how to cure malocchio. But she admitted that she wasn't really an avid believer. She didn't really advertise that she knew how to do the cure, but she did admit that on occasion when her kids were younger, and now her grandkids, when she thought, maybe let me try. Now what Maria had done is she had actually written down the curing ritual on a cue card, and it was hilarious because it was actually, she kept it in her, she had like a little box of recipes, and literally like she's got all her mom's recipes, and it's like malocchio, next card, gnocchi. So so already there she wrote it down and kept it, so that was a little odd. And what I had her do after we finished the sit-down interview, I had her, we were at the counter and I'm like, can you sort of go through the steps of the ritual? And she did the olive oil and water thing, and she's got this incantation. So she starts doing, you know, she starts explaining the olive oil and the water and da-da-da. And she takes the card and she's about to recite the incantation. And she kind of pauses and says, oh, actually, I'm not allowed to say this out loud. I'm supposed to just think it, sort of say it under my breath. She's like, I'm not sure I can say this out loud. And I was like, but Maria, I thought you didn't really believe in malocchio. She's like, yeah, but just in case, no, I really can't. And she refused to say out loud the ritual. So it's this weird kind of like, do I believe, don't I believe? What I've noticed is that if people have witnessed an occurrence of malocchio, either it happened to them themselves or to someone close to them, they become believers. If they've never kind of experienced it or witnessed it firsthand, they're a little more doubtful. So it's an interesting thing. If nothing else, I see it as it's definitely a part of our culture. if you want to or not. It's there. These amulets are all around us. We see them everywhere. You know, people kind of talk about malocchio in sort of, you know, hushed tones. It's not something we usually talk about openly, but it's there. So start asking your grandparents, your parents, your great aunts for stories of malocchio, and you might just be surprised at what they tell you. All right, our hour is up. I hope you learned something interesting about malocchio. As I said earlier on, I've actually got an illustrated coffee table book called Malocchio, Everything You Ever Needed to Know About the Evil Eye. It comes out August 31st in print. It's a beautiful illustrated coffee table book. You can actually pre-order it now. We're taking pre-orders. Just go to my website, redheadproductions.com. I want to thank the Montreal Italian Festival for inviting us to be part of this year's virtual edition. Take care, stay safe. Corni.
Nous vous rappelons que demain à 19h, il y aura le webinaire It Happened in Italy. Ensuite, vendredi le 21 août, à 20h, nous avons Nicola Ciccone.